Well, 2014 is finally coming to an end, and just like last year, I've decided to recap what's happened this year in terms of gaming, and there is a lot actually. I've only realized how many games I played in 2014 when I started making a list of them, bringing back a lot of good memories, and the bad ones of course, that I've tried to forget like a nightmare. Without further ado, let's get to the games, in no particular order, but I'll try to keep this thing more or less structured. The year started with a rather narcotic experience that is Metal Gear Rising: Revengance, that I've enjoyed a lot. The story is very silly, but the game seems to have fun with it, unlike other Metal Gear games. I've been playing Metal Gear Solid 2 lately, and the plot is just unbearably stupid, with Raiden being an awful character regardless of the game he's in. However, the meat of Metal Gear Rising lies in the gameplay that Platinum games are generally famous for. The first thing you do in the game is slice a giant Metal Gear in half with a sword, and it only gets better from there. There are some other playstyle sections, but you can easily screw them up and go back to literally slicing things into million little pieces. So if you don't have a Wii U to play Bayonetta 2, Metal Gear Rising is the spectacle fighter to get this year. Banner Saga was the first game that started a short line of Viking games that came out in 2014. And it's great that Vikings started to get some attention, however none of those games were particularly good, and neither was Banner Saga. The art in this game is amazing. Unfortunately, there is nothing much beyond the pretty face. The turn-based combat system lacks depth and feels like headbutting an axe. That makes battles just a waste of time. The story is decent, but the desire to end on the sad note is blatantly clear, making the ending underwhelming in my opinion. It may be worth experiencing once, but after I beat it, I have no desire to play it ever again. Might and Magic 10 Legacy. I think it was the first Ubisoft game to come out this year, and it actually was one of few good ones, which is ironic considering it is retro garbage loved only by people like me who enjoy a nostalgia trip. And yeah, I really like it, but still I would never recommend the game to anyone who is not nostalgic for old RPGs, cause the mechanics in this are really outdated, not to mention the graphics that look like us. Might and Magic 10 doesn't do anything to elevate the concept it tries to make you nostalgic about, unlike the game that does it, and as a result becomes one of my favorite games this year, The Legend of Grimrock 2. It is so good! This is the game I heartily recommend to anyone who likes RPGs. It's been crafted with love and attention, very tight in its design, and incredibly enjoyable to play. If it came out before Might and Magic 10, I wouldn't have touched Might and Magic 10 with a 10-foot pole. The Legend of Grimrock 2 is a definitive dungeon crawler. I guess the only better one may be Ultima Underworld that came out in 1992, but it's been so long I don't even remember what it's like. So go get Legend of Grimrock 2 and give your support to people that are bringing back what's been dead for years now. Broken Age, a famous game by Tim Schafer who, and let's be honest at this point, just fucked up. As we all know, he was given a lot of money by the community via Kickstarter to make a classic adventure game, and all we got is half of the game that is not exactly a classic adventure. Where the hell is my Act 2 team? Where are you hiding at? And most importantly, do you even have money to make it? Act 1 is decent I guess, but it was released in January 2014, so almost a year has passed and we haven't heard anything about the second act. It seems everyone just forgot the game exists at all. Thief 2014. I enjoyed it. I don't know why, maybe because it's been a while since I played a Thief game. Yeah, it's nowhere near as good as Thief 2, which is the pinnacle of the series, but if you forget the main story and about the fact that Garrett dresses like a gimp now for some reason, side quests and the city are not that bad. The game faced a lot of problems during the development and ended up in the hands of unimaginative people who tried to make Garrett into, well, Batman, who saves the world from something and I don't remember what exactly at this point. Focusing a game called Thief on anything but stealing is a dumb move from the get-go, but hell, what are you gonna do? Now, when time passed, I've forgotten most cringeworthy moments, and the only thing I remember is roaming the streets at night stealing things. That makes me not actually regret spending time with the game. What I regret spending time on is Castlevania Lords of Shadow 2. It is awful. A spectacle fighter that can be beaten by a single combo, that takes place in boring environments and copies a shit ton of stuff from Dark Souls. The worst thing is, it's not even a Castlevania game. It is a completely linear experience that has nothing to do with anything that defines a Metroidvania. Just avoid it like plague and go play Dark Souls, which is the best 3D Castlevania to date. South Park: The Stick of Truth. Well, it is the best and the last good Ubisoft game this year, and probably is the most accurate video game adaptation in history, mostly because the creators of the original show directed it. There is little to say about it. If you like South Park, you probably have already finished the game and loved it. If you don't like South Park, just don't bother. The Stick of Truth won't make you like it, so don't waste your money. Dark Souls 2. To summarize my feelings about it, I would use a phrase not as incredible as the first one, but still pretty damn good. It actually made me appreciate the first game even more and realize once again how brilliant it is. Dark Souls 2 is the game for people who have beaten Dark Souls 1 and still wanted more. Dark Souls 1, on the other hand, is the game for anyone who likes action RPGs. It is notoriously hard, but the difficulty level is one of the things that makes the atmosphere so rich and oppressive. If it wasn't difficult, it would just lack personality and be a time waster like this year's Lords of the Fallen, that not only is a mediocre game, but was broken on launch for about a month and could actually damage your PC, most likely due to the DRM system it used. It is a pointless Dark Souls clone that lacks atmosphere and depth, looks generic and totally misses the point of the franchise it copies from. So yeah, if you want a Dark Souls experience, play the first one, and then if you want more Dark Souls, play the second one. Easy as that. Age of Wonders 3. It is probably the most controversial opinion I have this year, and I fucking hate this game. Considering the fact that Age of Wonders 2 is my favorite spin on Heroes of Might and Magic, that I think goes beyond any Heroes game, expands it, becoming a far more superior experience, so I was eagerly waiting for Age of Wonders 3 naturally. And what I got as a result is a downgrade from Age of Wonders 2 and a better version of Heroes 6. You see, for me, Age of Wonders was always a game about being a mage. Basically, it is the game that gives personality to that thing in the sky that looks down upon its minions, giving them orders. It is the only game that makes you feel like a mage, that expands his area of influence, has heroes as his most trusted servants, and gives orders to minor beings. By excluding the mage from Age of Wonders, you destroy the very soul of it, and that is what Age of Wonders 3 did, and I hate it for that. This game is my biggest disappointment this year. Half Minute Hero 2: The Second Coming. That is the game I enjoyed. It is not as tight as the first one in its story and design, but it is a damn fun RPG that allows you to save the world over and over again in a pretty tight time limit. The reason it is inferior to the first one is that the first game was a pretty good parody of the RPG genre, while The Second Coming is just a gimmicky RPG. Which is somewhat ironic. I strongly recommend getting the first game, and if you enjoy it, get The Second Coming as well. It will most likely worth it in terms of time and money. War of the Vikings was another Viking-themed game that came out this year. I've played it for a little while and it seemed fun. Unfortunately, now it appears that the game is completely dead and only few people are still playing it. So it can be safely ignored. It had a nice theme, and this is pretty much it. On the other hand, Mount & Blade Viking Conquest came out recently. I played it for a little while, and it is Mount & Blade alright. Seems to have a bunch of technical problems though that I personally haven't encountered, but there have been a couple of patches out already, so I guess the problems will be fixed sooner or later. People who could play it though claim it's actually really good, but we'll see. Considering other Viking games that came out this year were not particularly excellent, let's just hope Viking Conquest will be at least as good as the original Mount and Blade warband. Child of Light. This is the game where the Ubi shittiness started this year, in my opinion. A failed attempt to make an artsy game crippled by the involvement of a big corporation in its development. As far as I know, it was supposed to be much more than it turned out to be, but a rushed release, day one character DLC, microtransactions, and rhymed dialogue just killed the game for me. By the end of the year, the only thing I remember about it is the start of a train wreck that basically placed Ubisoft where EA was last year. Watch Dogs was the point when Ubi Crash went into the full swing, the train got off the rails and dismembered body parts started flying through the air. Watch Dogs is an abysmal game. It is an overhyped piece of dog shit with one of the worst protagonists in the history of anything. I literally hate Aiden Pierce. Given a chance, I would happily break his legs and skin him alive. He's a Batman fanboy that wants to be a Dark Knight so hard, when his niece dies giving him a sort of a motivation to become one, you can almost see him jizzing into his pants in ecstasy. It boggles my mind how badly written he is, just a clusterfuck of cliches and motivations leading nowhere. And it's not like Ubisoft can't write good characters. It's just fascinating how bad of a character is the lead in their probably biggest release this year and what's supposed to be their new big IP. They even sold Aiden's iconic hats for the fuck's sake. But at the same time, the release of Watch Dogs was nowhere as bad as the release of Assassin's Creed Unity. Watch Dogs at least worked. It performed horrendously, but it worked. Then Assassin's Creed Unity, on the other hand, just wow, Ubisoft, you left me speechless. It was the point when your train wreck hit an oil tanker and both exploded in a magnificent fiery spectacle and your stock price dropped 9%. I bet it's Soul Templar is doing, isn't it? Thankfully, I didn't buy it. I'm not an Assassin's Creed fan. I loved the Black Flag, don't get me wrong, but when I found out that they replaced pirates with French people, I just said nope. And where can you go from pirates really? Almost everything is a downgrade. They're kinda past the Viking era, and it's gonna be a while till they hit that Cyber Ninja Space Pirates era, so I guess I'm gonna be revisiting Assassin's Creed in like 20 years. Cause I bet they're gonna be still running Assassin Templar nonsense into the ground. After Assassin's Creed Unity, Ubisoft also released Far Cry 4 and The Crew. But at this point I honestly don't want to engage in anything Ubisoft does, not for a while at least. Besides, Far Cry 4 looks like a reskin of Far Cry 3, with the main character being nothing more than a floating gun, and The Crew... Well, they managed to work Ubi Towers into that game as well, so if this is not the reason to ignore it, I don't know what is. Wait, no, the other reason is fucking microtransactions, ain't it? Fuck. Wolfenstein: The New Order. Even though not a bad game, I found it tonally weird. It is a game about Nazi robots on the moon that takes itself way too seriously. Well, the characters are just dull, the main protagonist is a brick, and everybody around him is what you've seen 1,000 times before. The moon sequence that I was looking forward to is also quite disappointing. If you want to do Nazis on the moon right, watch Iron Sky, that movie from Finland nobody knows about. But I personally can't take the notion seriously as the game wants me to, shoving all that grittiness into my face. Just have fun with it. In terms of shooting, it's also not what I call brilliant, cause it only has like one interesting gun that is outside all of the pistol shotgun assault rifle combo. But regardless, it is the best shooter that came out this year, as sad as it sounds. Titanfall died pretty quickly by the looks of it, and I totally disregard the yearly COD update as usual. The Borderlands, the pre-sequel, is just a blatant attempt to milk the franchise some more. So Wolfenstein is basically the only shooter that's worth looking at this year, apart from Ziggurat. That is good, but too damn short. I beat it on my third attempt, I think, and it took me like 2 hours. And yeah, you can play endless, but still, it's sad that the length of a run-through is not even the length of an average podcast. Another FPS that looks quite interesting is Depth, but it is multiplayer only and still lacks content. Murdered Soul Suspect and The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Two games that work around an idea of a detective with supernatural powers with a twist in the end. The funny thing is, in terms of gameplay, The Vanishing of Ethan Carter is a better game, but in terms of a twist, I personally liked Murdered Soul Suspect much more. Actually, the biggest problem of Vanishing of Ethan Carter is the ending. It is great until then. In terms of atmosphere and puzzles, it is much better than Murdered, but the ending is so abrupt and out of nowhere, it looks like the development just ran out of money and they decided to end the game. I played only half of it at the friend's house and watched the rest on YouTube. Maybe that's the reason I didn't like the ending. I don't know. On the other hand, I can tell you for sure that Murdered is a little more than clicking on everything around you with an occasional incredibly easy and out of nowhere stealth section that reminds me of arcade sequences and adventure games back in the day. The twist was nice though, not shocking, but not entirely predictable as well. I beat it only to see the ending and I was not disappointed, so here you go. Let's get to the good games, shall we? Shovel Knight is one of them, and it freaking rocks! It has tight, polished gameplay, great story, wonderful storytelling, and of course it is a great nostalgia trap. I cannot praise this game enough. The developers had a goal in mind and they have achieved it. I believe it is a must-play for anyone who likes action platformers. It doesn't even matter if you are nostalgic for NES games or not. Shovel Knight is a wonderful game and one of this year's jewels. Another jewel is Super Time Force Ultra, that is also an action platformer funnily enough, and the most innovative game this year. It takes an idea of time travel and brings it onto the whole new level, not to mention it's so bad it's good humor and storyline. It is one of those games that has to be played just for the sheer uniqueness of its mechanics and the variety of strategies you can implement using those mechanics. Like Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons last year, this game brings something new to our gaming table and deserves all the attention we can provide. Wasteland 2. I've recently beaten it and it is quite a fun game. I haven't played the original Wasteland, but I've played every Fallout game and Wasteland 2 for me is basically Fallout Tactics with a story. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Bethesda's take on Fallout and still consider Fallout 2 to be the best post-apocalyptic RPG. But Wasteland 2 is definitely one of the best, better than those Skyrim with guns things for sure. However, as you realize, this is coming from an old school RPG player, so if you don't find screaming at your sniper who constantly misses 90% hit chances fun, you will probably not appreciate Wasteland 2. But hell, you can murder Total Biscuit in it, so that at least is worth the price tag. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. One of the best AAA games this year, unexpectedly so. The best thing about it is the army mechanic that allows you to manipulate Sauron's army structure as you see fit, allowing for great stories to occur naturally throughout the gameplay that makes each player's experience unique. The worst part about it is that you get to the meat of that army manipulation mechanic only closer to the very end of the game, which is a shame cause I wouldn't say the story is all that brilliant, but it has its moments. The gameplay is certainly what carries Shadow of Mordor, cause it never ceases to be fun cutting through a legion of orcs towards your nemesis and cutting his head off. The most interesting thing this year, in my opinion, happened in the survival horror genre. I constantly come back to thinking about these two games because they came out back to back and are pretty damn close to textbook examples of how to do and how not to do survival horror. These games are Alien Isolation and The Evil Within. I've played them one after the other and the difference is jarring. While Alien Isolation is a subtle psychological horror, The Evil Within is just a cluster of scary cliches glued together by spunk. While Alien understands the idea of being isolated in a hostile environment where combat is your last option, The Evil Within has a turret section and a car chase. While Alien has a coherent story, The Evil Within rapes continuity and any degree of logic. Alien Isolation is exactly what I wanted from a horror game. I don't find it particularly scary, unfortunately, just because it's aliens, and since I've seen every movie featuring the slimy bastards and played almost every game, you cannot scare me with xenomorphs unless you teleport one into my room. But it is my personal attitude. The Evil Within, on the other hand, is just a clunky action game with monsters in it, so like Doom, you know, but bad. So, better luck next time, Shinji Mikami. The Witcher adventure game. That's a fun little thing that came out recently and I've been spending way too much time on playing with my friends. It is a great adaptation of the board game, besides the next year is the big Witcher year. The new book came out in 2013, I think, but now it's been translated into different languages. The Witcher 3 is coming out in May, hopefully, so the Witcher adventure game is a great thing to pass some time with friends while waiting for it. I love The Witcher and thank every god in existence that at least this franchise is in loving, caring hands. Cause, let's be honest here, if CD Projekt Red fucks up The Witcher 3, people will rise and burn their offices to the ground. Cause that's how we do it in the East. Transistor, brought to us by the creators of Bastion, a game I love. Transistor is also a very good game, however, it is not as good as Bastion in my opinion. Something is lacking from it, perhaps it is a rather abrupt death of the main villain, I'm not really sure. I like the combat system though, it allows for great customization and the main character is just amazing. One of the best female characters I've ever seen, she's a strong, independent and loving woman. The ending... just beat the game. It is very good, and its great art and music only gets you deeper and deeper into the emotional connection with what's going on. Now when I'm starting to remember it, I think I'll go listen for the soundtrack for a while. On that sad note, I wanna do a shout out to two games that I haven't played since I don't really enjoy these types of game mechanics, but I have watched a lot of and I really respect and support the message they're trying to get across. These games are Valiant Hearts and This War of Mine. Valiant Hearts takes place in a lesser known World War I and is basically an adventure game with a lot of QTE sequences, and I'm not a fan of either of these things. However, the story is wonderful, the ending is very emotional and the educational aspect is on the level. I think it is a very good game to play with your kids. It's pretty simple and arcadey, teaches history and definitely gets the message across that war is hell. A game I wouldn't show children at all before a certain age is This War of Mine, which takes a very dark and realistic approach to surviving in a war zone. Unfortunately, I don't exactly like this modern survival game trend, so I'm not interested in playing it. But if you like survival and an adult, this is the game to get this year. From what I've seen, the mechanics are complex enough and work pretty damn good. Well, the things you do to survive will really make you shiver in disgust when watching the next COD or Battlefield trailer. In spirit, it is very close to Spec Ops The Line, I think, a game that made me play SimCity 4 for several days cause I couldn't stand any degree of violence. In the end of this video, I wanna mention several games that I spent some time with this year, just a quick list of shoutouts. So, let's begin. Nidhogg, a fast-paced one-on-one action that was fun for about 2 hours. A great executed single mechanic, worth checking out I think. Jazz punk, more of a trip than a game, probably would be great to play on drugs, cause imagine it was exactly the state the developers were in while working on it. Banished, a good city builder that unfortunately lacks content. Took me about 17 hours to explore everything this game has to offer, that I feel is more than enough for the price tag. Hearthstone, didn't want to spend money on it, which makes getting hearts rather slow, so the game became stale and dull pretty fast. Yeah, you can win with basic cards, but it doesn't count if it is samey and boring. Luftrausers, a great little game about planes. I played it a bit on PC, but where it really shines is on my Vita. It is a very effective subway time waster, that's for sure. I kinda want to point out that Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes was on Steam sale for $13, that is much cheaper than its original $40 release on console, and $13 for 1.5 hour story, a better deal than some movie theaters, so I am looking forward to playing that. Goat Simulator. Don't buy it, it is a buggy piece of shit, and I'm not joking, just have some self-respect. The Elder Scrolls Online. Well, I cannot believe I'm saying it, but Goat MMO Simulator is probably a better deal than this garbage. Daylight. Don't buy it, it is a game for YouTubers to scream at. Watch me scream at it for about 3 minutes till I get bored on my YouTube channel. Hey hey! Blood Rain Betrayal. I've beaten it and quite enjoyed it. It is a fun little platformer if you can suppress all the horrendous bullshit the Blood Rain franchise reminds you of, thanks to Uwe Boll. Dynasty Warriors 8, the only Dynasty Warriors game I've ever played. It is quite fun and it is a freaking long game. I liked it, however I don't want to play a Dynasty Warriors game ever again. Divinity Original Sin. I spent about 12 hours in it and it is a pretty good game. Looking forward to beating it. However, it was clearly designed for co-op, since it is quite weird to choose dialogue for both of the main characters when they are arguing. Feels like I'm developing a split personality disorder. Freedom Planet. That is a great game for old school Sonic fans. I've played it a little bit and I love it so far. I don't even want to murder the characters, which is unusual since when Sonic starts talking, I want to tear off his spikes and stab him with them. Also, the cat girl got a motorcycle. Ha! Planetary Annihilation. I've played it for a couple of hours and kinda don't want to come back to it. It just seems too bothersome to play, especially when the action takes place on several planets. Switching between them all the time becomes a mess. On the other hand, this game made me come back to the original Total Annihilation that I still love. Endless Legend. I've played it for about 10 hours and I love it so far. Besides, before Civilization Beyond Earth gets a couple of expansions, I feel Endless Legend will be my go-to 4X strategy. It is definitely the best fantasy 4X that came out since Civilization 4 Fall from Heaven 2 that I've played for hundreds of hours. Rollers of the Realm, a cool twist on pinball. It has quests, characters you can level up and equip, and special abilities. I play it in short bursts when I'm bored, and it perfectly does the job of entertaining me for a brief period of time. Well, that is it for this year. So, Happy New Year, Christmas, Hanukkah, all the pagan holidays you may or may not celebrate. Just have fun, that is what's important, and it was a pretty good year. Thanks for watching, guys, the name is GrrrVahrrr, and I shall see you in 2015.
Goodbye, goodbye, see you again. Goodbye, goodbye, see you, my friends. Goodbye, goodbye, I had fun today. I have fun today.